Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Michael Jaden X here. In this episode of Momentous Men, we're going to be talking about Martin Luther King. Without further ado, let's get started. Martin Luther King Jr. was born Michael King Jr. on January 15th, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia, to Michael King Sr. and Alberta Williams King. He had an older sister named Christine and a younger brother named Alfred Daniel. Now, how did he get the name Martin? Well, his father was the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. And in 1934, the church went on a trip to Germany where they learned about Martin Luther and everything he did. And the dad was so impressed by it that when he got back to Atlanta, he changed his name and his son's name to Martin Luther King, making them Martin Luther King Sr. and Jr. Now, because the times they were growing up in, they were living in the time of segregation, so meaning blacks and whites were not allowed to get near each other, use the same businesses, like same restaurants, neighborhoods, bathrooms, or even water fountains. One example I know is that when Martin was a little boy, him and his dad were going shoe shopping, but because it was a white-owned business, they weren't being treated professionally, and they had to sit in the back, which the dad decided that he couldn't buy them up front. He just wasn't going to get them from there at all, so they left. Now, like I said, Martin's father was a preacher at Ebenezer Baptist Church, so was his grandfather, and it's like a generational thing that the King men did. Now, Martin was really good in school. He even skipped his freshman and junior years of high school and attended Morehouse College as a freshman by the time he was 15. That's pretty good. By the 1950s, he started studying at Boston University, where he met a young woman named Coretta Scott, who was a student at the New England Conservatory of Music. At first, she wasn't interested in dating preachers, but she did agree to talk to him, and they hit it off. They got married on June 18th, 1953, in Alabama. The couple was going to have 4 children, 2 daughters and 2 sons, Yolanda, Martin III, Dexter, and Bernice. Exactly 2 weeks after their oldest daughter Yolanda was born, on December 1st, 1955, 42-year-old Rosa Parks from Montgomery, Alabama, was arrested for refusing to give up her seat to a white man on the bus, and this sparked the Montgomery bus boycott, in which Martin Luther King rose to stardom for leading, as he was a young activist who recently moved to Alabama, because he was originally from Georgia, and before that was studying at Boston. The bus boycott started on December 5th of 1955 and lasted all the way to December 20th, 1956, when the Supreme Court ruled that segregating on buses was unconstitutional. But let me tell you about the bus boycott. It was agreed that every black person in the city of Montgomery was not going to ride any buses. So meaning the bus business will be losing out on black money, which presumably was a large chunk of the customers, as they'll lose a lot of money. With Martin leading the boycott, he would be targeted multiple times, as frequently getting arrested during protests. And even in the middle of the boycott, on January 30th, 1956, while he was doing a speech, he got news that his house had been bombed with his wife and daughter inside. Thankfully, they were not harmed. And then 2 years later, he survived an attempted murder. On September 20th, 1958, he was doing a book signing in Harlem, New York, where a 42-year-old woman named Izola Curry, who was mentally ill, approached him, asked him if he was Martin Luther King, which he responded yes, then pulled out a 7-inch letter opener and stabbed him in the chest. She would be arrested while he would have to be rushed to the hospital, but that blade was almost touching his aorta, and it was really bad because had it actually popped the aorta, he would have drowned internally in his own blood. So put him in the ambulance. They would have to be careful because, like, they can't go too fast because they can't hit a pothole on the road because then that could have made the aorta pop. So they got him to the hospital and gave him emergency surgery in which they were able to remove the blade and save his life. But during that time, it's also really important that he could not sneeze, as that would have made the blade go in, and he would be told this afterwards, and he even referenced this in the speech he would give 10 years later. But we'll get to that later. Isola Curry attacked Martin because she was mentally ill, and her delusional ass really thought that he was a communist and was spying on her, so she wanted to kill him to get him to stop spying on her. Whatever, lady. When she was declared unfit to stand trial and would have to undergo psychiatric treatment, in which King held no ill will to her. Now, as part of his protest, he had to go to Birmingham, Alabama to lead a march. But the thing is, Birmingham was very segregated, arguably worse than Montgomery. And while he was doing the protest there, he was arrested for the 13th time. 13th time down, which he had to stay in jail. And that's when he wrote his famous letter from a Birmingham jail, which I'm about to go over. The letter was written on April 16th, 1963, while Martin was in the Birmingham City Jail, and it argued that people should stand up for their rights, even if it meant not acting the most accordingly, even if it meant breaking laws, as Martin was known for preaching nonviolence, but you should still stand up for yourself. I'm actually going to read some of the letter because the real letter is really long, so I'm just going to read it's like the first paragraph. While confined here in the Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement calling my present activities unwise and untimely. Seldom do I pause to answer criticism of my work and ideas. If I sought to answer all the criticism that crossed my desk, my secretaries would have little time for anything other than such correspondence in the course of the day, and I would have no time for constructive work. But since I feel that you are a man of genuine goodwill, and that your criticisms are sincerely set forth, I want to try to answer your statements in what I hope will be patient and reasonable terms. Yeah, little writing but that's just the first paragraph, and it's online, so if you want to read all of it, then I'll see if I can put a link in. But that was just some of the letter. Now here's the moment we've all been waiting for. On August 28th, 1963, in Washington, D.C., Martin Luther King led the March on Washington, and on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, he delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech, which says, I have a dream that my 4 little children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of the character. Preach. Wise words. A year later, in 1964, at the age of 35, he became the youngest person to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. That's his most famous speech, and he would go on to be involved in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. On March 7th, 1965, a march was held from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, in which King wasn't present, but it was an outbreak of violence from the police against the protesters. The event was called Bloody Sunday. In March of 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee, the garbage workers there were protesting over better pay and better treatment, in which Martin would often go down to Memphis to join the protests. On April 3rd, 1968, he would give his famous I've Been to the Mountaintop speech. In this speech, it goes back 10 years earlier when he was stabbed in New York City. That's why I said it will be important later, because now he's talking about it now. And What he's talking about, that if he had sneezed, he would have died. And now he wouldn't have been around for other greater things that he would go on to do and partake in throughout the movement. This would be his last speech, as the next day, on April 4th, 1968, while staying at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, he would be shot. He was rushed to St. Joseph's Hospital and was pronounced dead at 7:05 p.m. 2 months later, his killer, James Earl Ray, was arrested while trying to flee the country and was ultimately sentenced to life in prison. In 1986, then President Ronald Reagan signed a bill making Martin Luther King Day a national holiday. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, make sure you like and subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you can be notified whenever I post a new video. See you in the next video. Bye.